overwhelmed by how many scales we're supposed to be learning, and I think this is completely ridiculous. And I'm going to compare this to the Matrix, particularly where Neo is being taught by Morpheus in the dojo. Morpheus is trying to get into Neo's mind that he is not in reality. He is in the Matrix. This means all the physics laws that he knows from, quote, reality don't actually exist. And I want to center in on the line.
You think that's air you're breathing now?
And I'm going to compare that to the scales. You think those are scales you're playing? Today we're going to start talking about leading tones, but I really don't like that term because it's very loaded. So let's say I'm playing an F major pentatonic, and I add in the 4. Notice it kind of sticks out. It's because this 4 wants to turn into the 3. So we'll say that the 4 leads into the 3. But the 4 does whatever I tell it to do. Imagine a toddler wanting a piece of candy. Well, you don't have to give it the piece of candy. I can go where I want to. I can make it go to the 3, or make it go to the 5. What I have to understand is that it's tense. It's causing tension. And when you add in these leading or tension tones into your solo, it's going to make your solo sound more interesting. But a lot of us are just throwing them in there saying, hey, my teacher said I could do it, therefore I can do it. We don't actually understand what's happening here. We want to understand that there's tension being added into the solo and we need to release it. That's why it was so important that you paid attention to those other lessons. We're adding in types of tension and then we're going to release them. And right now we're going to learn how to add particular tensions in at particular times. What I'm going to be doing is playing a solo and adding in these tensions so you can see how they are reacting. What I don't want you to do is get caught up in all these names. It's literally ancient Greek, and we put way too much emphasis on the internet on modes. What we should be doing is paying attention to how the interval is acting in the situation that I'm putting it in. So the first thing I did there was an F major pentatonic, and I added in the 4. Now this 4 wants to turn into the 3, which is fine. The other one is the 7. 7 wants to turn into 1. But again, 7 goes wherever you tell it to. And this is commonly referred to as a major scale or an Ionian mode. And it's the most common mode you're going to be hearing. What I again don't want you to do is get caught up in like, oh my goodness, what scale and what key am I in? What I want you to be paying attention to is you're in a major situation and you're adding a 4 to get this particular flavor. Or you're adding in a 7 to get this particular flavor. That's the most important thing. So go find a backing track that's in a major or Ionian key and start experimenting with it. Now, because we are adding in flavors whenever we feel like it and not practice them specifically, it's easier for us to do this. So this was particularly known as Lydian. So I'm playing an A major pentatonic, and I'll add in a 7. But we remember from the last time that 7 wants to turn into 1, but it goes wherever you tell it to. But the other flavor that we're looking at is the sharp 4. Technically, the sharp 4 wants to turn into the 5, but again, sharp 4 goes wherever you tell it to. Now, there's also a stereotype with Lydian that it's dreamy, or it can do all these other type of things. Sharp 4 is sharp 4. You add it in when you think it is appropriate to add it in. Now, also remember that there's context here, so if it's something bad, don't come crying to me because you're like, hey, you said that you could play whatever you feel like it. Context matters. Make sure it is the appropriate time to be adding a sharp 4. And don't be surprised if it doesn't work all the time. Now this particular one was an A major pentatonic, and I added in the 4. Okay, and we know from last time, 4 wants to turn into 3 wherever you want it to go to. But now I added in the flat 7. Notice that sounded pretty bluesy. It's because it's a stereotype. Flat 7s are usually used in blues and rock. Again, you put it wherever you feel like putting it. Now, don't be surprised if it doesn't work all the time, because a lot of times we're not actually in a bluesy situation. We're in a poppy or jazzy situation. So make sure you're using your ear to figure out where in the world you should and shouldn't be using this. Now the other pentatonic we were using was a minor pentatonic, and there are modes that go along with that one. Again, don't get caught up in the names. Get interested in the flavors. And the most common one is known as natural minor or Aeolian. Now let's analyze that. So I was playing a B minor pentatonic, but then I played a 2. This 2 wants to turn into the flat 3, right? But again, it goes wherever you want it to go. Now the other one is a flat 6, which wants to turn to 5. Get used to playing with these in the backing tracks and notice how they go wherever you tell them to go to. Now this particular backing track was Dorian. So we have a D minor pentatonic, but I added in a 2. And we remember from last time that a 2 wants to turn to the flat 3 if you're in a minor pentatonic. But then I added in a 6, right? This is going to create a lot of instability. And the 6 wants to turn into the flat 7, which is kind of weird because the flat 7 is also unstable, right? So this is very popular amongst funk, jazz, and rock players because you have access to way more notes, because the whole thing is more unstable. A lot of people like to bend from the 6 to the flat 7, but again, it's just a flavor. You put it where you think it's appropriate. Now there are 2 modes we have not talked about, which is the Phrygian mode, which has a, again, minor pentatonic here, but I'm adding a flat 6. Okay, that's fine. But then there's a flat 2. Right? And that gets used a lot in like metal or flamenco. And then there's also Locrian. We don't like Locrian. Locrian is of the devil. I can't even think of one song that has used Locrian that doesn't sound like garbage. So these are the modes that you want to get used to the most. So technically you are now outside of the box. And I think this is funny because a lot of the notes we added in here were actually still physically inside of that box. But what I don't want you doing is going out there trying to learn as many licks in these particular modes as you can. That's not how this is acting. These are about intervals and flavors and knowing when you should and should not be playing them. If the backing track you're playing over says Ionian, you know to add in a 4 and a 7. If it says Mixolydian, now you add in a 4 and a flat 7. Make sure it's appropriate to the key and the genre that you are in.